Hello and welcome to the Sisters for Fitness Wellness Show. I'm Stephanie Gaines-Bryant. Today we're talking about women's reproductive rights. And we've got a great guest on today. We've got Sandy Bell, and you're the president of Maryland Now.
That's correct.
So Sandy, a lot has been going on in the news over the last couple of months, over the last few years, about women's reproductive rights. As we know, Roe versus Wade was passed in the 70s. Here we are, 40 years later, and we're back. Yeah. Seems, I don't know whether we're back where we started, but it is a huge issue. What do you think is going on?
Well, part of what's going on is who's controlling the country at the moment. Because of course, you know, the Republicans have always been against choice. And so, and they're controlling a great deal of the state legislatures as well as the federal. And so they're pushing it as far as they can. And
what's interesting when you see that some of these states, the laws that they're trying to pass, that it's a lot of men deciding what's best when it comes to a woman's reproductive health.
Yes.
And a lot of times, sometimes they question these men and they say some of the most ridiculous things because they really don't have a concept of how a woman's body works.
Yeah, I love the one about, well, if she's raped, you know, it just, everything shuts down or something.
Yeah, what does that mean?
Who knows?
And where could you possibly have got that from?
Yeah, I don't know. I think they just make it up as they go along.
And also these laws that want you to have an abortion within 6 to 8 weeks. A lot of times, as we well know as women, at 6 to 8 weeks, you might not even know you're pregnant yet.
Right. That's true.
So it's like, who's advising these people? And like I said, it seems like it's a bunch of men deciding what's best for us.
Oh, I think it's always been that way, and I think that, you know, it's just, yeah, it's crazy. Fortunately now, though, in the House of Representatives, you know, this last election, a whole bunch of women were elected, and it's so exciting, and that's what we need to do. More women need to get out there and run, and we need to take over these bodies that are legislating, so that, you know, these men can't legislate our bodies.
What are the laws like in Maryland, in the state of Maryland?
Well, in Maryland in 1991, we passed basically our own Roe v. Wade law, and it was taken to referendum in 1992, but it passed at the ballot with almost 62% of the vote in this state. And also, I think when it went to referendum too, that's when the bypass was put on it for minors. To be able to go to their doctor, and if the doctor felt like there was good reason not to inform the parents, that the parents did not have to be informed that their daughter was having an abortion.
So in other words, when the law passed, it said that any woman can have an abortion, but if you are a minor, you need the permission of your parents, or the doctor has to alert your parents?
I think that, yes, it did, but then I think that when it went to referendum, that it was actually changed in the referendum, that a doctor could not tell the parents if he felt there was good reason not to, that either the minor was mature enough to make this decision for herself, or that he felt like she might be physically or emotionally abused if her parents were told, or, you know, whatever reasons that he felt that it was in her best interest not to tell them, then he didn't have to.
So unlike many states, it looks like Maryland doesn't have the issues that a lot of states have.
Correct.
And have they, over the years, tried to strengthen the law in any way? Or?
Actually, Speaker Bush, bless his soul.
Yes.
Yes. Speaker Bush, I think, and Senator Miller as well, had both talked about actually putting an amendment to our Constitution, granting women, you know, control over their own bodies to make sure that it was, you know, there forever, that they couldn't take that away from us.
And go ahead.
And it didn't happen, but hopefully it will come up. I mean, now that we have Speaker Adrienne Jones, and her being a woman, maybe she will pursue getting that into our Constitution.
And when we talk about reproductive rights, we're not just talking about abortion, we're also talking about things like contraceptives.
Yes.
And the morning after pills. How does Maryland rate when it comes to those things as well?
I think that we're doing pretty good, but probably not as well as we could be. I know that Planned Parenthood did a thing where they had people go into drugstores and ask for Plan B and to see how difficult it was to get it. And I don't think it was terribly hard, but sometimes it wasn't always available. And so I think that, you know, we need to work on that. To get it more readily available for women when they go in. This cracks me up that I did it, but I even went into a drugstore in Coward County where I live myself and asked for it. They probably looked at me like, why is this woman asking for birth control? She's obviously past the age.
Did you have it? How was it?
It was fine. They had it behind the counter, and they told me what it cost, and you know, and whatever. So, it was there.
Let's talk about Maryland now stands for National Organization for Women.
Yes.
And let's talk about, you've been in this organization for over 20 years.
Yes.
And I'm sure you've seen a lot.
I have.
How have things changed when you decided to join this organization to now?
Well, the problem, I think, is that things change and then they seem to go backwards sometimes. So I don't know if things have changed drastically. But I think that there's more awareness about a lot of issues that compelled me to join now, like sexual harassment on the job. And and of course now with the Me Too movement.
Yes, that was my next question.
Yeah, it's really getting out there. You know what's going on in workplaces and how much it diminishes a woman. You know that they're treated that way.
There was a report, or it's common knowledge that certain women. Well, we all make less money than men,
right.
But certain women are especially impacted by that. For example, African-American women, Latino women, and Indian women.
And Pacific Islanders. And,
yes, make a lot less than white women and, of course, men. And where does that come from? How does that happen? You and I were talking off the air, and I was telling you a story about 20 years ago. I was working for a radio station, and my co-host, he was the host of the show, he was making 20 times my salary. Yeah. And I remember going in and asking for a raise and asking why there was such a difference in our salaries. And the general manager told me that he had a family, so that's why. So he had a family to support, and I didn't. I had a husband, so that's why he was making more money than me, because I had a husband and he had a wife and several kids to support.
Right.
Which is not a good answer.
No. I mean, because who's to say that you didn't have a family as well, and just because your husband was working? I mean, some families, the husband and wife both have to work in order to support themselves and to put a roof over their head. I mean, there was a time, yes, when men worked and made more because most women were in the home. But that's not the case anymore. And one of the reasons it's not is because of, incomes not being what they should be. And two people have to work for the family to survive.
Exactly. And what difference does it make what your family is or what my family is? If we are doing the same job,
you should make the same money.
Exactly. Don't worry. It is none of your business that I'm married or that I have children or what other reason. It's he's doing this job, I'm doing this job. We should be making
the same
money.
Absolutely. Absolutely, yeah, and it's really sad too that, you know, like you said, that there's such, you know, a difference between, you know, well, like I told you off air, you know, Asian women make the most compared to a man, and then white women, black women, you know, Latinas, and yeah, and on down the line, and it's just.
Why do you think, because we were talking about that as well, the reason why? Because of misperceptions.
Yes.
And who is what?
Yeah, misperceptions that people look at women of color and think that they're not as smart, I think, as white women, and they don't think white women obviously are as smart as Asian women because they pay them more, and yeah, it's terrible that, you know, that there is that misconception, because we're all human and we all have the same capacity to be educated and to be intelligent, and it has nothing to do with the color of your skin, nothing at all.
And going back a little bit to reproductive rights, let's talk about the fact that women are dying due to pregnancy-related issues, like nothing we've ever seen. I mean, the numbers are worse now than they were 30 years ago.
Yeah.
What's happening? Do you think it's more access to care?
I think that a lot of it is, yes. I think that a lot of people, healthcare has become so expensive, and you know, I think that that was one of the things that, you know, the Obama administration was hoping to help with the Affordable Care Act, you know, to get more people, you know, covered with health insurance to get better health outcomes. And of course now, you know, they're trying to destroy that. And, you know, yes, if you don't get good prenatal care, if you don't have, you know, continuity of care so that someone knows you and sees you from the beginning until you know, the end, you're not going to get as good a health outcome. And I think especially, you know, in low-income neighborhoods, it's a real issue for them.
Yeah, because if you find out you're pregnant or what, and you don't go until the second or third trimester
Yes.
to see a doctor, I mean, so many things. I'm a mother of 4.
Yeah.
So many things can go wrong in
Yeah.
that between time that could probably easily be remedied if you see someone.
You can get, you know, pregnancy-related diabetes, you know, you can have blood pressure issues and all kinds of things that, yeah, and if you wait until, you know, like you said, the second, third trimester, and these things have gotten out of hand, they're going to be difficult to get them under control. And unfortunately, you know, for women of color, most of them live in, you know, poorer neighborhoods, and they don't get the quality care that they deserve and that they need.
Exactly.
And you know, the maternal death rate for black women is 3 to 4 times that of white women, and something has to be done about it.
And we were also talking about off air. We had a great conversation off air. We were talking about off air about, you know, what's the solution? What can we do? And you were saying that it changes from administration to administration, Congress to Congress, president to president. So you can make 10 steps forward, then you'll have to make 11 steps back sometimes.
Yeah, it's terrible, it really is. And right now we're in a situation where we have a great House of Representatives and a Senate that's sitting on everything. In the House of Representatives, they passed a bill called the Maternal Death Act, I think is what I said it was called. And it was to put a lot of money into research to try to find out why we are having this issue with maternal death in this country. And of course, you know, the Senate, it hasn't even been brought up for a vote. But there are some black women in the country that have decided they're not going to sit around and wait for Congress. And a group of black female mayors have formed a coalition, you know, to work together to try to solve this issue. There's also a group called, I think it's Black Mamas Matter. And, you know, these women have just said, we're not waiting on you.
Yes.
We're going to do something to find out why our women are dying and get it fixed.
And a lot of times when we talk about reproductive health, a lot of organizations who are against women getting abortions, no one has the solution to what do you do after this child is born.
Yeah.
No one, it's like you're pro-birth, but you're against, you know, or you don't have a plan
Right.
for what happens after
Yeah,
this baby.
they're not concerned about, you know, the child having housing and clothing and food, and they just want to see it be born, and then they're done with you. Yeah, they want to control you up to the point until you have that child, and then you're on your own. And that's not pro-life. That's pro-birth. You're right.
And you know, we have some of the best health care in the world, or so we think, that we have some of the,
Yeah.
but if you don't have access to
To
that
it.
health care, what good does it do?
Yeah, it's not helpful at all if you don't have access to it.
You know, and we complain, I am neither for nor against socialized medicine, but we're seeing in many cases where people are being cared for. It's not about the pharmaceutical companies. It's not about who's going to pay for what research.
Yeah.
It's about caring for the people. And are we putting enough into actually caring for the people?
And I don't think so. And I'm telling you, in some of these other countries, Sweden and Denmark, Germany, lots of them who have socialized medicine, the people there are happier. I mean, they did, I think it might have been Switzerland, you know, where they did this survey, and the people there were happy, and it's because the governments there take care of people, and it's not just health care. It's, you know, keeping people well to begin with. For instance, the FDA in this country bans about 11 chemicals in women's cosmetics. In the European Union, they ban 1,000.
Wow.
So, I mean, you know, these countries are protecting their people better from getting sick in the first place by, you know, keeping chemicals out of their bodies and, you know, out of their environment. And I mean, I think the whole system here is failing us.
How about research when it comes to researching different illnesses and how you can take care of your people?
Well, I think in this country, unfortunately, a lot of the research is done by drug companies, and their research is just to make pills that will control your disease, but they're not interested in curing it because they want you to buy their pills for the rest of your life. So,
and of course, we see the impact of that through the opioid crisis.
yeah.
We have really seen, I mean, there is a true awareness that I have never seen in all my years
Yeah.
when it comes to that than never before, because the crisis, and I've had people on the show several times to discuss this, at epidemic levels in some
Right.
states, just destroying community after community after community.
And it's because nobody has taken the steps to find better ways to control pain, and I think that there are more natural, better ways to control pain. I mean, I'm glad to see, I'm sure some people are not, that, you know, marijuana, at least for medicinal purposes, has become legalized in many states in the country, because they have found that CBD oil and even marijuana itself is good at treating so many things. PTSD, for instance, and we have a huge issue with that now. We've been at war for like 18 years, and we have so many young men coming back with PTSD. And, you know, we need to find good treatments for them that are not opioids so that they're addicts.
Exactly, exactly. Let's go back for just another moment to women and the reproductive rights. People think if you restrict abortion that they're not going to happen, and that's absolutely not true.
No.
People are going to find a way.
Yes, they're just not going to be safe. And women will be dying again, you know, from going to back alley places to get it done, and you know, getting infections and whatever else. Yes, women will just be dying again. And you know, these people who say that they're pro-life, how about the life of the woman? I mean, she's here, living, breathing human being. Is her life not important?
I remember HBO did this series years ago, and it talked about from the early days to Roe versus Wade, and what women had to do or what women would go through to get an abortion, the desperate measures that they would take. And
well, that's where the coat hanger came from as being a symbol, is because women would, I mean, stick things up in them to basically pull this fetus out. I mean, it's horrible to think about having to go to those measures, but when you're so desperate, you know, you'll do almost anything. And you know, one of the things that really gets me too is a lot of people who, you know, don't want women to have abortions. Those same women are against birth control.
Yes.
It's like, you know, if you want to prevent abortions, which, by the way, the rate for abortions has gone down because of birth control being more accessible. And, you know, that's one of the things, you know, the Affordable Care Act said that insurance companies had to cover contraception. And, of course, now the Trump administration has introduced rules saying that employers can tell their employees, well, no, your insurance isn't going to cover that. And it's like, well, that's what I said about going back and forth. You know, you go a few steps forward, you go back. If you're against abortion, you should be all over allowing women to have access to any kind and every kind of birth control, including the Plan B, you know, the day after pill. And
but,
I mean,
you know, and I think I would venture to say most Americans don't have a problem with women having birth control pills.
No.
And like you said, I mean, wouldn't you want women to...
Actually, the majority of the population in this country is also okay with abortion. I mean, now, a lot of people under certain circumstances or within a certain limited amount of time, but the majority of people in this country do not want to see Roe overturned.
And also I was looking at some statistics this morning. The Catholic women, many Catholic women are using contraceptives.
Yep.
So
I know a few. Yeah.
So I mean, to me, it just makes sense.
Yeah.
It just makes sense. Wouldn't you, if you don't want women to do this, wouldn't you do whatever you need to do, or wouldn't you want to promote women doing something safe to prevent this from happening? I remember my grandmother. She had 14 kids. Like every 2 years for 20 years, she had another baby. Those days are over.
Yeah. My grandmother had 9.
Yeah, you should be. You could. You know, those days are over where you have the babies. And
I think one of the problems is just people who are uninformed. You know, there are people who think that birth control pills are an abortifacient, and they're not. They, you know, they prevent implantation in the uterus, but I don't consider that an abortifacient, and I think that's just, they just don't know what they're talking about.
And also there are procedures that I wonder, when it comes to changing these laws, there's certain procedures like DNCs, or if you miscarry and the doctor needs to go in and do some additional things, is that considered you having an abortion? Or will the insurance company say we're not going to cover that?
Yeah, I don't think if it's a miscarriage. The problem is now there are some states that, you know, women are having miscarriages and they're accusing them of trying to abort. And I mean, it's just gotten really crazy, you know. And I loved when Brett Kavanaugh was being interviewed by Congress. I think that one of the best questions anybody asked him was Kamala Harris. And she said to him, "Can you tell me how many laws govern a man's body?" And the answer is 0. So why are they all over trying to govern our bodies? You know, that's, in my opinion, it's not the government's job.
And also, as we discussed earlier in the program, a lot of these people making the decision, they simply don't know what they're talking about.
Right.
When it comes to what happens to a woman's body during pregnancy. At what point do most women know that they're, unless you're like really, really keeping track, 5-6 weeks, you don't know.
Yeah.
and it's like they don't have any concept of how a woman's body works and what the real world implications of these things are.
Right.
You know, and they're horrible things, but they happen. A 13-year-old getting pregnant by a family member. Her little 13-year-old body is not ready for that.
No, and some girls that young have been forced to have children, and it's just awful to even think about it. It's just awful.
Yeah, or if the life of the mother is at risk, or if this baby has some sort of chromosomal issue and you know the baby is...
Well, and that you don't find out either until at a certain point, and I think it's, you know, second term. I mean, yeah.
Exactly.
That before you find out that there's some severe, you know, fetal deformity or abnormality, you don't find that out until late in pregnancy.
And I don't know if any woman just says, hey, I want to have an abortion today.
Yeah, no.
This is a life-changing decision.
Yes.
The women I know who have been through it, it is a life-changing decision. I don't know anybody who walks into that casually.
Yeah, no, I don't think so either. I think, you know, it's a very difficult decision, but I think that it's one that should be made between a woman and her significant other, if she has one, and her doctor, and no one else.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. In wrapping up our discussion today, as we just mentioned, Maryland, the state of Maryland, thank goodness, doesn't have those issues.
No.
And you said what they're working on, Mike Bush, who passed away recently, wasn't able to complete it, but you're saying they're working on some things that will, in the future, strengthen the laws.
Well, they're talking about putting it and making it a constitutional amendment because, as we know, laws can be changed. You know, a law can be passed and a law can be overturned. You know, you get a different representative body and they can overturn it. So even though we have our own, basically, Roe law now in Maryland, so if Roe was overturned, we would still have legal abortion in Maryland. Some legislature could come along and change that.
Yes,
And
yes.
so if it's put into the Constitution, then it's there, and it's...
Well, it's been a pleasure talking to you today. We've
Yes,
been
to you
talking
too.
to Sandy Bell, the president of the National Organization for Women in Maryland.
Yes.
Thank you for joining us. It's been a
Thank
pleasure.
you for having me. It was a pleasure for me too.
You've been watching the Sisters for Fitness Wellness Show. I'm Stephanie Gaines-Bryant. Have a great day.